Hello, everyone, and welcome back to our virtual Mishnah Berurah share. We're holding in Mishnah Berurah Chelik Gimel, and Mirtz Hashem today we will be learning Daf Kuf Samach Dalid Amid Beis. We are continuing to learn Hilchos Shabbos. We pick up today on the very top line of the Shulchan Aruch on Kuf Samach Dalid Amid Beis, Siman Shin Chav Ches Sif Tes. Our learning should be a schus for Achedek Beis Yisrael, Hanasunim Batzaru B'Shivya, Ha'imdim Ben Bayom Ben Bayabasha, Hamakim Yerachem Alehem, V'Yetziah Mitzar L'Rvacha Me'afela La'ira Mishibud L'Geula, Hashta Bagala V'Zman Kariv and Emaramein. Our learning should be a schus for Shalema for Yeshua Levi Ben Ahuva Malka Chana, Yitzchak Ben Tzion Ben Dusha, Rivka Bas Shira Leah, Chavadasa Bas Serel, and Gila Shifra Bas Ilan Udal. They should have a refuah shalema b'sarch shar chayla Yisrael, and the schus of the limud Torah of Klal Yisrael. The Rebbeinu Shalom should protect and watch over every member of Klal Yisrael b'chol makom shehem. So we're continuing to learn the halachas here of a chayla, and when you're b'chal Shabbos to help a chayla, when you're not b'chal Shabbos to help a chayla. Many of these halachas are very difficult for us to really put into context. A lot of this is based on Gemaras in Avodah Zarah and elsewhere that describe various ailments that Chazal say were known to involve sakanas nefashos. We don't necessarily understand what all of those ailments are. Modern medical science in certain cases may tell us otherwise. One of the main takeaways that we have to take from this siman is the fact that even when there's a suffix sakana, we are Mechal Shabbos, and when the need arises to be Mechal Shabbos, we're Mechal Shabbos with alacrity, like the Lashon of the Mechaber was. The Mechaber said that when it's time to be Mechal Shabbos, when you have to be Mechal Shabbos, in the words of the Mechaber in Sif Beis, mitzvah lechalel alav es Shabbos. It's a mitzvah to be mechal Shabbos on behalf of a chayla, even when there's a suffix sakana. V'hazoriz hareze meshubach. The one who does it with greater alacrity is praiseworthy. V'hashoyel hareze shayfich damim. Somebody who dilly-dallies and he wants to go ask a shayla whether he should or he shouldn't is called a shayfich damim. I think that klal, that rule, in a certain way, at least at the level of this shir, that rule is going to be a clearer and more important takeaway than some of the individual ailments over here that we don't really know what they are. Obviously, when there are doctors around, when there's a Hatzalah member around, when there are paramedics around, we're going to hear what they have to say. I guess one of the reasons that I'm I don't want to use the word prevaricating, but one of the reasons I'm speaking this way is because we're going to see today, the Mechaber is going to discuss something, and somebody could look at it and very quickly jump to be Mechal Shabbos for something that we would recognize as being not serious at all. Now, the Mechaber did tell us in Sif Dalid, the Mechaber said, Aval kishayodim umakirim ba'osei chayli. If we know and we recognize a certain ailment, shemamtin ve'ein tzar chilul, and we know that that's something that we could wait till after Shabbos for, and there's no need to be Mechal Shabbos, also lechalol alav afa pishu makashal chalol. It would be also to be Mechal Shabbos, and that's even if we were dealing something which is a makashal chalol, something that affects the internal organs of the body that the Mechaber spoke very, very stringently about and said whenever you have a makashal chalol, you run to be Mechal Shabbos. But even by a makashal chalol, if it's something that we're yoidim umakirim oisai shemamtin ve'ein tzar chilul, if we recognize it as something that does not require Chilul Shabbos, we don't run to be Mechal Shabbos. Now against that backdrop, let's take a look here at Sif Tes, says the Mechaber. Ha'choshish be'enov, if somebody has pain in his eyes, Oy be'enoi, or in one eye, it doesn't have to be both eyes. V'yesh by tzir, and there is a buildup of fluid in the eye. Oy shahayu shoisesais mimenu dema'is, or if the eye is tearing excessively. That's shoisesais mimenu dema'is, if tears are pouring out of the eye. So that's an eye that's mamish running, it's tearing excessively. Machmas hake'ev, because of pain. Oisha Yeshoy says dam, or if the eye has blood running out of it, chas v'shalom. Oisha Hayabayrira, or if it has some kind of a discharge. So that wouldn't be a normal discharge. It's not a normal discharge of tears. It's another kind of discharge. Not sure if it's a discharge of pus. It may be. So in those cases, utchilas uchla, and this is happening at the onset of the ailment. So somebody's experiencing the onset of an ailment in his eye, like the Ramah says, pirush, the pirush of tchilas uchla is tchilas chayli. It's the beginning of the ailment. So if somebody has an eye pain, right? That's the way the Mechaber started. Hachoshish be'enav means that there's a pain in the eye. It's causing this discomfort in the eye. And there's either a buildup of fluid, or there's excessive tearing, or there's blood coming from the eye, or there's some kind of a discharge from the eye, and it's tchilas uchla, which the Ramah says is the beginning of the ailment, tchilas chayli, mechalalin alav es haShabbos. This is something that you mechal Shabbos for. Now again, you could read this mechaber, and you could say, okay, somebody has a pain in his eye, and his eye is tearing excessively, you're mechal Shabbos. Now I can tell you as a former contact lens wearer that if you get something caught under your contact lens and you scratch your cornea, a scratch on the cornea is really, really, really uncomfortable, and it will cause your eye to tear excessively. Now, in a normal instance of a minor scratch on the cornea, a minor corneal abrasion, you're not going to run to be Mechal Shabbos. So again, that would fall under the rubric, I guess, of Sif Dalid. If you know that the ailment is something that does not require Chilul Shabbos, of course you're not going to be Mechal Shabbos. So again, we can't just read the words here of the Mechaber, take them exactly literally, and run to be Mechal Shabbos. What we do see here from Sif Tes is that Chazal and the Mechaber treat an ailment of the eye as being very, very, very severe. Let's take a look here at the Mishnah Berurah. The Mishnah Berurah Kan Chav Beis says, "Va'af agav de bishum sakanas aver ein mechalelin beisser da araisa lekulei alma ugid lekamon b'sif yod zayin." Even though later on in Sif Yod Zayin we're going to be talking about sakanas aver. That's when there's a sakana to one isolated limb of the body. This is not sakanas nefashos. So over there, we don't do malacha daraisa. Yid doesn't do malacha daraisa for that chayla. Says the Mishnah Berurah, the eye is different. Ayin shani. Why? And over here, the Mishnah Berurah brings down a Gemara from Avodah Zarah of Chesed Beis. Dirshu yaki de'ena b'li batalia. The Gemara has a very interesting lashon over there in Avodah Zarah, and the Gemara links vision and the eye to the heart. There's different understandings in the Rishonim exactly what this means. There's a machlokes Rashi and Tosfos. Rashi over there in the Gemara Avodah Zarah seems to say that this, somehow the muscle of the heart somehow is linked to vision and to the eye. Whether that means that some kind of a sudden change in vision or an ailment of the eye could be indicative of an ailment of the heart, I'm not sure. Or is it the other way around? Is it that an ailment of the eye can affect the heart? Now that could be. Somebody, chas v'chalila, gets ocular cellulitis. Ocular cellulitis could be very, very dangerous. It could quickly progress into something which could be a sakana. Now, what does that have to do with the heart? Well, if it's ocular cellulitis and it goes into the bloodstream, then yeah, it could affect the heart. Tosfos has very interesting words. Tosfos says that vision, the vision of the eye, has to do with havanas halev, the understanding of the heart. Now we know that when it comes to machshava, when it comes to thought and thought processing, the Torah very often interchanges. The Torah doesn't talk about the thoughts of a person's brain. The Torah always speaks about machshavos liboy, the thoughts of his heart. So for some reason, in the lashon of the Torah, we always find that machshava, thought, processing, emotion, intelligence, is always linked to the heart. It's not linked to the brain. Now, obviously, it's not because the Torah couldn't come up with a word for brain, right? The Torah could have said roish, machshavos roishai. Even in when we put on tefillin in the morning, right? We say that we're meshabed the machshavas of our lave. We put the shel yad opposite the heart, and we talk about the machshavas halev, right? We say neshama, but shel roish we say haneshama shebemoichi imshar chushai v'kochaisai. But we often link machshava to the lave, not to the heart. Now, interestingly enough, modern science has found that there are cells in the heart that are incredibly similar to brain cells, and it seems that the heart does have its own center of sense or thought processing or sensory processing of some kind. So when Taisus says that vision is linked to Havanas Halev, it could also mean that somehow, whether it has to do with the ocular nerve and the sense of vision, that somehow is linked to the heart. But for whatever reason it is, the Gemara in Avodah Zarah is very clear that ailments of the eye have to be treated very severely because there's some kind of a link between the eye and the heart. And therefore, the Mishnah Berurah closes off Eiskat Chav Beis, and he says, Ve'ika sakanas nefesh. There could be sakanas nefashis when you're dealing with an ailment of the eye. Eiskat Chav Gimel, the Mechaber said if there's a rira, if there's some kind of a discharge from the eye, the Gemara Mashba Duhadin Kidcha. The Gemara in Avodah Zarah mentions another ailment in the eye. We have over here, we had several. We had a buildup of fluid. We had excessive tearing. We had blood. We had some kind of an excessive discharge. The Gemara also mentions kidcha, which is an inflammation. So an inflammation, a swelling of the eye, could be something that could be dangerous, and therefore you would be Mechal Shabbos. Again, as long as we're talking about a case where you don't know what it is. If you know what it is, and you know that it's not dangerous, and you know that you could wait, that's a different story. That's Sif Dalet. The Ramah put in here Tchilas Chayli. We're only Mechal Shabbos if it's the beginning, it's at the onset of this ailment. But, says the Mishnah Berurah, V'ched be'emtza hamachla. Or, doesn't have to be specifically at the beginning, it could be the middle of this illness when the illness is not diminishing. When the illness is still going strong, you would be Mechal Shabbos. Avo b'soif chayli. But if it's at the end of the ailment, shekvar tosh machalosai, if you see that it's healing, if you see that it's getting better, and the ailment, the illness is weakening, then like a sakanta, al yidei simanim halalu, then these simanim do not indicate a dangerous situation, and you would not be Mechal Shabbos. V'choshken kisharoitz alasis refua kedei lahagbir or enov, certainly to do some kind of an act of refua in order to improve vision, that's the bevadei ein mechalal mishum zeh, we certainly would not be Mechal Shabbos for that. Moving along to Sif Yud, 3 lines down in the Shulchan Aruch Kuf Samach Dal Amud Beis, says the Mechaber, Kol chayli shaharoifim oimrim shehu sakana. Any ailment where the doctors say that there's a danger. Aval pi shehu al habasar mibachutz, even if it's something that is totally external. So earlier we spoke about a makas cholol. The Mechaber told us that anything involving an internal organ, right away we consider it a sakanas nefashos. Even the Mechaber is saying over here, any ailment that the doctor says is dangerous and you need to be Mechal Shabbos, even if it's external, even if it's completely external, some kind of big infection on the exterior of the body. So it doesn't matter. Mechalalin alav es haShabbos. If the doctors say that it's dangerous, you're Mechal Shabbos. What if one doctor says you have to be Mechal Shabbos, and another doctor says no, you don't have to be Mechal Shabbos? Says the Mechaber, Mechalalin, you are Mechal Shabbos. Says the Mishnah Berurah Katan Chafei, Sharoifim, anytime that the doctors say that something is a sakana, you're Mechal Shabbos. Says the Mishnah Berurah, Fil Eino Yehudi. This is true even if the doctor is an Eino Yehudi. Kevin Sharoifei Umanhu, if he's a Roifei Uman, if he's a licensed practitioner, if he's a doctor or bona fide doctor, if he says that something is a sakana, you're Mechal Shabbos. The Kosovar Advaz Chelik Dalet Siman Samech Vav Im Hachoyle Omer Tzarech Ani Litrufa Ploinus. Let's say the patient says, I know I need a certain trufa, I need a certain medication, and it's going to involve Chilul Shabbos, v'haroife amar ein tzarich, and the doctor says no, he doesn't need it. Shayman lachayla. You listen to the patient. This is based really on a pasuk. The pasuk says the exact words aren't coming to me. That the chayla knows meriras libay. The patient knows. The patient could sense really what's going on in his body, often better than the doctor or anybody else. So if the patient says he needs a certain trufa, even if the doctor says no, you listen to the patient. Unless the doctor says no, that would be a big mistake. If you give him that drug, it's going to harm him. Then you listen to the doctor. Where the Bir Halacha discusses this in greater detail. The Mechaber said, if you have a machlokes amongst the doctors, where one doctor says you are to be Mechal Shabbos, the other doctor says not, the Mechaber said, Mechalalin, you are Mechal Shabbos, Oiskan Chavav, the Safek Nefashos Lahakal. Because when we're dealing with Safek Nefashos, we go Lakula. So we have one doctor that says you're required to be Mechal Shabbos, you listen to him. You're Machmir on Pikuach Nefesh, and you're Mekel on Hilchos Shabbos. Says the Ramah, 5 lines down near the end of the line. Hagah, v'yesh aimrim dafka Yisraelim. There are those that say that we only listen to the. I'm sorry, I skipped something here. Let's go back. 4 lines down near the end of the line. V'yesh misha aimer. Says the Mechaber, v'yesh misha aimer she'ein tzarich mumcha. There are those that say that we don't even need a real bona fide doctor. We don't need a mumcha. We don't need a professional to go tell us that we should be B'chal Shabbos. When it comes to medical issues, especially back in the day, they didn't have, the medical profession wasn't quite what it is today, where people went to medical school for years and years and years and all sorts of training and everything else. It was really, you had somebody who specialized in medicine, but people weren't running to the doctor all the time. People only ran to the doctor for something really serious. When it came to more garden variety ailments, people were their own doctors. Sometimes to go to the doctor was a major trip. So people got used to dealing with your garden variety ailments and recognizing what's a serious ailment. People had to have that knowledge on their own. Especially if you think about it, back in the day, you weren't hopping in the car and going to the doctor's office. It could be that going to the doctor would be a whole day event. So people became very adept at treating themselves. And part of being adept at treating themselves was they had to be able to recognize what's serious and what's not. Therefore, the Mechaber says, Kol b'nei adam chashuvim mumchim tzas. Everybody was considered, at least at some level, a mumcha when it came to medical issues. So even if he's not really a doctor, if somebody looks and somebody says, hey, this is serious, we got to be Mechal Shabbos, there's a yesh b'shomer that you're Mechal Shabbos. And the Mechaber says it's Safek Nefashos Lahakal. Again, this is because we're being very machmer when it comes to B'kuach Nefesh. Safek Nefashos, if it's a case of Safek Nefashos, Lahakal, we're Mekel in Hilchos Shabbos, and we would be Mechal Shabbos. Says the Mishnah Berurah Kan Chav Zayin she'ein tzarich mumcha. When we call makom, nevertheless, having said that, says the Chav Chaim, Dafka kishayomer shemakir ba'oisei chayli, kamay shekasa simin tafrei shudches in Hilchos Yom Kippurim. If it has to be that the person says, look, I've seen this before. I know what this is. This is something that is a sakana. Not if somebody looks and says, I don't know, this looks scary to me. Maybe we should be Mechal Shabbos. That's not an opinion. That's worth taking into consideration. When is it an opinion? It's an opinion when the guy says, I know what this is. I've seen this. I've dealt with this. This is a sakana. That's an opinion that you have to give chashivos. The gam, and furthermore, while we're saying that we give every person some level of mumchais, and we're willing to listen to their opinion, the gam einay neman lahakchish hamumcha afilu lahakal. We have to put this in perspective. Yes, if somebody is sick and a non-doctor comes along and says, I've seen this before, I know what this is a sakana, you need to be B'chal Shabbos, then yes, we'll be B'chal Shabbos. But what if there's a doctor there? What if there's a mumcha? And the doctor says, you don't got to be B'chal Shabbos for this. And this non-mumcha says, no, I'm telling you, you do have to be B'chal Shabbos. No. then you're not going to listen to the non-mumcha. And the Mishnah Berurah says that's true. Afilu lahakal. We're not even going to value his opinion to the extent that we're going to say, oh, now there's a suffix sakanas tefashos, and we should be b'chal Shabbos, right? You might have thought the doctor says you don't have to be b'chal Shabbos. The non-doctor says I recognize this, and I think you do. Maybe that's enough to create a suffix sakanas tefashos, and maybe now you shouldn't be b'chal Shabbos. Says the Mishnah Berurah, no. The layman against the doctor, we're not going to give him any credence whatsoever. All people are considered to have a certain basic level of mumchais when it comes to areas of medicine. And again, we're talking here, even if it's not something that affects an internal organ. Certainly, in cases like this, where you're going to be b'chal Shabbos based on the opinion of a non-mumcha, if you could do whatever needs to be done, al yidei eno Yehudi, toiv yoser, kamesha biyarti, Babir halacha. Now we go to the Ramah 5 lines down. Says the Ramah Haga, v'yeshaymem dafka Yisraelim. There are those that say that we only give credence to the opinion of Yisraelim. Aval stam einam Yehudim she'enon roifen. But to go to listen to an Eina Yehudi who's a layman, loy mechaskinan oisam kibikim, an Eina Yehudi who's a layman, we don't give any credence to. Says the Mishnah Berurah's Kadchav Tes, dafka Yisraelim. Why is it that we would only listen to Yisraelim? When we're listening to a Yisrael is Machshiv Shabbos. So if the Yisrael says, I've seen this before, I know what it is, you have to be Mechal Shabbos, we'll take that into consideration. But an Eina Yehudi who says to be Mechal Shabbos, to him, there is no seriousness about being Mechal Shabbos anyway. But by a Yid, Vaday Soimech al Hamcha Osai. Oiskat Lamed Aval Stam. But an Eina Yehudi layman, we don't listen to the Chain Iker. Okay, says the Ramah Viter. 6 lines down near the end of the line. Misha writes some interesting case. Over here, we're going off on a bit of a tangent. Now we're not talking about illness. Misha writes him la'ansai sheyavar avera gedola. Somehow we know that there's a Yid, maybe who's been taken captive by a guy, or somehow he's amongst Goyim and he's under their influence, and they are trying to force him. That's la'ansai. They're trying to pressure him and to force him, sheyavar avera gedola, that he should be over a serious avera. I don't know, they're trying to get him to eat a cheeseburger. So we know that there's this guy who's been taken by Goyim, and they're trying to force him to eat a cheeseburger. So, and the question is, if somehow, through Chil Shabbos, you might be able to save him. I don't know exactly what the case is, exactly what the Chil Shabbos is, but somehow, maybe you need to go drive to where he is. So through Chil Shabbos, you might be able to save him. Says the Ramah, Ein mechalelin alav haShabbos kidei la'atziloi. Now again, this is not a person who's in danger of his life. This is not a person who is in physical danger. This is not a case where chas v'chalila, the Goyim have taken a Yid and they're beating him or they're threatening his life. No, what they're trying to do is they're trying to pressure him to be over an Avera. So in that case, you're not Mechal Shabbos to go and save him. Says the Mishnah Berurah, why is that? It's cut Laman Aleph, Ein Mechalelin, because, says the Mishnah Berurah, basically, do the math. Ein Oimrim Loila Adam Chatei B'Shvil Sheyizke Chaverecha. We don't tell one Yid, you do an Avera, in this case, you be Mechal Shabbos to prevent him from doing an Avera, right? So you be Mechal Shabbos, Ruvain, you go be Mechal Shabbos to save Shimon so that Shimon shouldn't end up eating a cheeseburger. So the math doesn't work. You're being Mechal Shabbos instead of him doing an Avera, but you're doing an Avera. So we don't tell one Yid, you do an Avera so that he shouldn't do an Avera. However, points out the Mishnah Berurah, but if they're trying to force a Yisrael to be over on one of the Gimel Chamuros, Avodah Zarah, if you know that they have a Yid and they're trying to force him to be over Avodah Zarah, the Gilei Arayos, or they're trying to make him be over on one of the Arayos, Ushvichas Damim, or they're trying to pressure him to kill somebody, V'hu Mishar Shehanenas Yimsar Atzmai Lemisa B'Shvil Zeh, and we know that this Yid is a real Yerei Shamayim, and he's not going to be over on one of the Gimel Chamurais to save his life. Those are things that you bechuyev to be Ma'aseh Nefesh for. So we know that the Goyim have this Yid. They're trying to pressure him to be over on one of the Gimel Chamurais. We know that he's going to give up his life instead of being over on one of the Gimel Chamurais. So now it's Sakonos Tefashos. Now we have to go be Mechal Shabbos to save him in order to save his life. Because if we don't save him, he's going to be Ma'aseh Nefesh and he's going to be killed. In that case, says the Mishnah Berurah, Efshir detzarech lechalel kedei shelo yavoi lozeh. It's interesting that the Mishnah Berurah uses over here the lashon of Efshir. It's possible that then we have to be Mechal Shabbos in order to save him. Okay, moving along to Sif Yud Aleph. Chayla sheyesh by sakana. When you have a chayla, sheyesh by sakana. And this is an interesting case. She'amadu b'yom HaShabbos, the doctors go take a look at him on Shabbos, and they evaluate him. And they say, she'tzarich lasei loy refuah yedua. They look at this fellow, and they say, yes, he's in danger. He's a chayla sheyesh by sakana. But he's not going to die today. They go, they do an evaluation. He's got a very dangerous illness, and this illness could kill him. But it's not going to kill him today. It's not going to kill him tomorrow. It's not going to kill him the next day. What he needs is, he needs an 8-day course of treatment. And if he gets the 8-day course of treatment, it will save his life. But if you don't start the 8-day course of treatment today, on Shabbos, he's not going to die today. Okay? Very interesting. So, chayla sheish b'sakana, shamadu b'yom HaShabbos, shetzarech lasis l'refuah yedua, sheyesh bo meleches chil Shabbos shmona yomim. They evaluate him and they say, he needs an 8-day course of treatment. And the treatments are going to involve Chil Shabbos. So for 8 days, you got to do Chil Shabbos for this Chayla sheyesh by sakana. Ein oimrim namtin ad halayla. You might be tempted to say, wait a second. If we start the course of treatment today on Shabbos, and it's an 8-day course of treatment, we're going to end up being Mechal Shabbos for him twice. We're going to be Mechal Shabbos for him this week, and then next week, which is day 7, we're going to be Mechal Shabbos for him again. So if we start today, we got to be Mechal Shabbos twice. If we push it off and we start tomorrow on Sunday, we'll only have to be Mechal Shabbos once. We'll have to be Mechal Shabbos next week. So why should we be Mechal Shabbos twice? Let's be Mechal Shabbos once. But not only why should we be Mechal Shabbos twice, how could we be Mechal Shabbos today? There's no Sakonos Tefashos today. Ask the doctor straight out. If we're not Mechal Shabbos today, is he going to die today? The answer is going to be no. He's not going to die today. He's good for 8 days. We just evaluated him. He needs an 8-day course of treatment. Today he's not going to die. If you postpone the treatment from today till tomorrow, he will not die today. All right, so let's postpone the treatment. Let's start it tomorrow. Says the Mechaber, no, you can't do that. Ein oimrim namten ad halayla v'nimtza shaloi l'chal olav el Shabbos achas eliyasu miyad. You have to start right away. Even though you're going to be Mechal Shabbos twice, this Shabbos and next Shabbos, you got to start today. And even though today there's no Sakonos Tefashos. Why? Because it's true that today there's no Sakonos Tefashos. But if you wait and you start tomorrow, maybe he won't make it to day 8. Right now, the doctors are saying he's a chayla sheish by sakana. He needs an 8-day course of treatment. If you start today, he'll make it. He'll live through the 8-day course of treatment. Maybe if you postpone the beginning of the treatment till tomorrow, who says he'll make it to the end of the 8-day course of treatment? So you got to start today. Says the Mishnah Berurah, Ois Cotton Lamid Beis. Ein Oimrim Namtin. They ain't stira bizeh lahad soif Sif Dalid. There's no stira between this and the end of Sif Dalid. And what the Mechaber is talking about is that at the end of Sif Dalid, we said that if you recognize the chayli, if you recognize the illness that the person is suffering from, and you know that you don't have to be Mechal Shabbos today, you know that you could delay the treatment, and you know that he won't be B'sakana, so then the Mechaber said you can't be Mechal Shabbos. So what the Mishnah Berurah is saying is, again, you might think that, wait a second, how could you be Mechal Shabbos today? The doctors just said that he's not going to die today. The doctors just said he's going to live 8 days. He needs an 8-day course of treatment. They didn't say, if you don't start today, he's going to die today. No, he's not. Even if you don't start today, he's not going to die today. So wait a second. In Sif Daled, we said that if we see that the Chayla is not in Sakana today, we're not allowed to be Mechal Shabbos. So how are you allowed to be Mechal Shabbos? Says the Mishnah Berurah, no, it's not the same. Says the Mishnah Berurah, ain't steering me the hard like Sif Daled. The Hasam Aloi Mai Rishi Yadei Umaku Shayadei Amtanasi Yada Erev Lo Yagir Shomer Yusa La HaChayla. Over there in Sif Daled, we know that there's no harm in delaying. There's no downside in delaying. Masha Enken Hacha. Over here, we don't know that there's no downside in delaying. Maybe if we delay and we start the treatment on Sunday, maybe he'll die on Wednesday. Because we delayed the beginning of the treatment. We delayed the onset of the treatment. So no, he's a Chayla Shebe Sakana. You got to start the treatments right away. The Ramah ends off Sif Yod Aleph, and he just refers us back to a tiny little Siman, Reish Ayin Ches, or Lechabis Haner B'Shvil Sheyishan, to put out a ner, to extinguish a ner on Shabbos, so that the Chayla Sheyesh by Sakana should be able to sleep. Ayin Le'el Siman Reish Ayin Ches. This is a Mishnah in Babeh Madlikin that we say every Friday night, B'Shvil HaChayla Sheyishan, to put out a lamp, to extinguish a fire for a Chayla Sheyesh by Sakana, that is mutter. Moving along to Sif Yud Beis, says the Mechaber. Very, very interesting Mechaber over here. A very interesting machlokes, the Mechaber and the Ramah. Says the Mechaber, Kishemechalel in Shabbos al Chayla Sheyesh by Sakana. When you are Mechal Shabbos for a Chayla Sheyesh by Sakana, Mishtadlin, you should put in effort, Shaloy Lasay Sayidei Yehudi, do not have an Eini Yehudi perform the Chil Shabbos. Uktanim, do not have a minor child perform the Chil Shabbos. Vinoshim, and don't have women perform the Chil Shabbos. Ella al Yidei Yisraelim Gedolim Ubenei Das. When you're Mechal Shabbos for a Chil Sheish by Sakana, you bedafka should be Mechal Shabbos. It should be a Yisrael who's a Godel, who's Chayiv b'mitzvahs, and he should be a Bardas. He should be an intelligent one. And Mishnah Berurah is going to tell us that according to the Mechaber, if there's a Talmud Chacham, it's the Talmud Chacham who should be Mechal Shabbos. So don't be a framak. Don't turn around and say, okay, we're dealing with a Chil Sheish by Sakana, but Tony is here. Let Tony do the Chil Shabbos. Why should we do it? Or, wait a second, there's an 11-year-old here who's perfectly capable of doing the Chil Shabbos. Let him do the Chil Shabbos. There's a woman here. Let her do the Chil Shabbos. No, it should be a Yisrael, a man, a Gadol, and a Bardas. Very interesting. Let's take a look here at the Mishnah Berurah, why this is. It says the Mishnah Berurah, Katan Lam Gimel, Shalei Lasik, Satam. The reason for this, Kasav HaRosh, is a Rosh of Besechtes Yuma. The Rosh says, Mishum Dezimnin Delesnahu. Sometimes you're not going to have Tony. Sometimes you're going to be in a place where there are only adult, male Yidden. V'asi Gamkein Lahaduri Basrayu. If the minig is going to become, if the way people are going to comport themselves is, that even when you're dealing with a Chayla Sheish by Sakana, they're going to turn to the Eini Yehudi, then one time there's going to be a Chayla Sheish by Sakana, there's going to be no Eini Yehudi, and people are going to go, oh, what do? There's no Eini Yehudi. Let's go get the guy. No, you have to know that you're dealing with a Chayla Sheish by Sakana, you do not need a guy. Otherwise, people are going to wait around looking for the guy, and the Chayla is going to drop dead. He's going to die on us. Now, points out the Mishnah Berurah, V'tam zeh shayich gabiktanim ve'enam Yehudim. Now, this concern makes sense. I understand why the Mechaber would tell us, don't go to the Eini Yehudi and don't go to the Katan. Why? Because the fear is like this. If people are going to see that when you're dealing with a Chayla Sheyesh by Sakana, you bedafka turn to somebody who's not chayiv b'mitzvahs, a goy or a katan, so then they're going to say, all right, that's the halacha. The halacha is that you need somebody who's not chayiv b'mitzvahs. And then another time, they're going to go waste time and look for a goy or a katan. But that concern doesn't seem to hold water by women. Women are chayavis b'mitzvahs. The women are muzhar in all of the Isurei Shabbos the same way a man is. So no one is going to look and say, oh, last time they went to a woman, so it must be that we need somebody who's not chayiv b'mitzvahs. No, the woman is chayiv b'mitzvahs. So why is the Mechaber saying don't go after women? Says the Mishnah Berurah, by women, the reason not to go for a woman is a different reason. Because Shema Yomru, Shaloi Nitein Shabbos Litchais Af B'Pikuach Nefesh. Somebody might say, why did they turn to a woman? Why'd they have a woman do it? It looks to me like they had a woman do it. Must be that the men know that really Pikuach Nefesh is not Doicha Shabbos. So they gave it over to a woman to do. Why? I don't know. But the men know that really Pikuach Nefesh is not Doicha Shabbos. They had the women do it. So now people are going to think that, wait, if they went and they had a woman do it, it must mean that somehow it's not so geschmack to be Mechal Shabbos, even for Pikuach Nefesh. Then another time, they're not going to want to do it. They're going to be Misatzel, and the person is going to come to Sakana. Or another possible reason, says the Mishnah Berurah, Shema Yekilu Hanasha B'Davar V'Yavayu L'Chal Shabbos B'Makam Acher. The other fear that the Mishnah Berurah brings down from the Rambam is that if you have the woman be Mechal Shabbos for Pikuach Nefesh, they're not learning, they don't know the halachas, and it might bring about a kalias, they might become kal in Shabbos. I remember one time I had to be Mechal Shabbos for an ill individual. So I guess you could be Mechal Shabbos sometimes. So, okay, my husband really, really needs a hot coffee to go learn the daf. I'll go cook up water. I'll make him a hot coffee. They don't know how to be Mechalik, between B'Kuach Nefesh and another tzorich. A man who learns Hilchas Shabbos and has been exposed to the klolim and the yesodos of Hilchas Shabbos is not going to come to be mekel. But a woman maybe will come to be mekel. The Mechaber said, going to cut your daled, Ella al Yedei. You should bedavka use male Yisraelim that are Gedolim and Bnei Das. Says the Mishnah Berurah, according to this Mechaber, Ukishayesham b'maimid zeh chachamim. If there are Talmidei Chachamim there, mitzvah lechatchila lasis chilul zeh al Yedeim. The Talmidei Chachamim should go do the Chilul Shabbos. Because that's the halacha. They should show. It should be very, very clear that the halacha is that when there's Sakonos Tefashos, or even suffix Sakonos Tefashos, you're Mechal Shabbos. People will see that even the Rav went ahead and was Mechal Shabbos. Then people will understand very clearly that halacha kenu, that's the halacha, and next time they'll act with alacrity. Ram b'Pirush HaMishnah, this is brought down from the Rambam and the Pirush Mishnayos the Rambam, Perk Befanin, and also a Riyaz v'Tashbeitz, Chelak Aleph Siman Nun Dalet. Vedan, you should know, says the Mishnah Berurah, the Kol Sif Zeh Mai V'Shekulam Oim De Ba'is HaMaimed. It says, Mishnah Berurah, you shouldn't come to make a mistake. You shouldn't have a chayla who's sakonis, a chayla sheish by sakana, and now you have to be b'chal Shabbos, and you're going to say, oh, I have to go get the Rav. the halach is that the Rav is supposed to be b'chal Shabbos. I'll be back in 15 minutes. I got to go get the Rav to be b'chal Shabbos. Says the Mishnah Berurah, obviously this is only if they're all standing there. Aval ileka sham anoshim v'yesh noshim sham. If there are no men around and there are only women, bevadi ein lehem lahamtin. The women shouldn't wait. They should act with alacrity, and they'll get schar for being Mechal Shabbos. In other words, again, don't take it the wrong way. The woman will hear you listening to the Dirshu share, and she'll pick up that women aren't supposed to be Mechal Shabbos for Pikuach Nefesh. No, obviously, it's only women there. They have to do what they have to do. Okay, now let's take a look at the Ramah. The Ramah has a very different take. Says the Ramah 3 lines off the bottom. I go. The Yesharim, there are those that say, if you could do the malacha that needs to be done, without postponing what needs to be done, and without any delay whatsoever of what has to be done, and you could do it al yidei shinui, you could do it perfectly, just as fast with a shinui, al yidei shinui, do the malacha with a shinui. Because once you do malacha with the shinui, it's no longer in the Sidaraisa, now it's in the Sidarabbanan. And if you could use the agency of an Ein Yehudi without any delay whatsoever, Tony is standing right there, you taka should have the malacha done by an Ein Yehudi. And that is the minik. Aval, however, if there's any concern that the Ein Yehudi who doesn't value life the way we do, if there's any concern that the Ein Yehudi is not going to act with alacrity the way a Yid does, that the Ein Yehudi is going to be slow, he's going to be late, he's going to take him longer, Ein Lasois Al Yedei Ein Yehudi, then you should not use an Ein Yehudi. We're not taking any chances over here. Says the Mishnah Berurah, if the malacha that needs to be done could be done without postponement and without any delay whatsoever, then you should do it with a shinoi. Why? Says the Mishnah Berurah, very obvious. Because if you could do what needs to be done beheter, we're not going to tell you forsake doing it beheter and instead bedafka do it beisser. The near end, it would seem, says the Mishnah Berurah, also, if the shinoi will take 2 seconds longer and it's not going to be mafriya, the chayli, in any way whatsoever, you have to be 1,000,000% certain that it will not risk any harm to the chayla, then nami mesachremat kidei lasi yidei shinoi the enei elusid rabbanon. Then do it through a shinoi, so there should not be an issur, so it should only be an issur rabbanon and not an issur daraisa. Oiskat lamed vav al yidei ein Yehudi v'uadin al yidei ktanim. If you could use a cotton, matoiv manoim. Oiskat lamed zayin v'chein noegem v'ataz kasav delav minig v'sikenhu. After all is said and done, the Taz says this is not the minig of the v'siken, to go ahead and use an Ein Yehudi, or use a cotton, or use a shinoi. Even if technically you could use an Ein Yehudi, we know that a Yid will act with greater alacrity. Look, watch a Yiddish HaTorah member and watch a Goyish EMS member. If there's even a suffix, v'yesh sakana, and there's a v'yesh sakana bebirur, kalazariz areze meshubach. If we know that there's a question of sakana, then if there's even a suffix, we should always go for a Yid, and like the Mechaber said earlier, harei ze meshubach. I do remember, I'll close out with a memory that I have. I remember many years ago on a Shabbos Chanukah in Yeshiva by us, there was somebody in the middle of the Friday night Suda, somebody came running downstairs to the dining room from the dormitory upstairs, yelling that there was a fire in one of the dormitory rooms. So, of course, I was one of the first ones. I ran out to go grab the phone and call 911, because if there's a fire anywhere in the building, it's zichas hakanas nefashos. I never saw Reb Chaim Mintz run as fast as I saw then. He came tearing out of the dining room. He was all the way on the other side of the dining room from where I was. I was a lot closer to the payphone. For those of you who still remember payphones, I'm dating myself over here. I was closer to the payphone than he was. He came running down the hall from behind me. He pushed me, not so gently, out of the way. He apologized later, and he got to the phone before I did. And he knocked the receiver off the hook with his elbow. He caught it in his other hand. It was so smooth. He jumped into the phone booth, knocked the receiver off like this, caught it in the other hand. With his other hand, he used his knuckle, and he dialed 911, and he called for the fire department. And then he came to me to apologize for pushing me out of the way. But he told me that he realized that he could make the phone call. He could do it just as fast as anybody else, and he could do it with a shinoi. And he didn't know if I would have had the presence of mind to try and do it with a shinoi, and I would not have. I would have done it straight out. But he knew that he could do it just as quickly with a shinoi and do what had to be done, and that's why he pushed me out of the way. He said to save me, and this way he would do what had to be done with a shinoi. Okay, thank you so much for joining me for limud HaTorah. This is limud HaTorah should be megan. And God's Klal Yisrael, the Baruch Hashem should send Yeshua Sefuas Parnaset Shidduchim to all those in need. We should be zeicher to see the BS God Tzedek from Herav Yameinu. Amen. Be well.